Allan sat in the twilight, alone in a large empty house. A pathetic excuse for a fireplace burned faintly in the fireplace, providing the only illumination. Half a bottle of Gentleman Jack in his right hand, a revealing piece of paper in his left. He wanted to burn her, turn back time, take a break. Life doesn't work like that. He took a sip of bourbon, running his hand roughly over his eyes. 50 years, married exactly half of my life. Maybe it was meant to be. 25 years of growing up, 25 years of a happy marriage. Then the rest is living hell. Something had to balance the scales. He was the happiest man in the world. No man with his life can escape the day when the snake's eye falls out. 25 years, silver anniversary. They worked for their future, planned carefully, never living beyond their means, raised children, thank God they grew up and left home before this built their retirement. As if he now has some kind of future. Allan looked at his watch and got ready. He stood up awkwardly and put the alcohol away. He took the piece of paper in his hand, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it into the fireplace. On Tuesday and Thursday. She'll be back soon, exhausted and trying to hide it. Disheveled, sweaty, tired. She will meet him, hiding behind her mask. He'll have to wear his own. Just a little more until he decides what to do. Becca tried to keep up the pretense. She smiled as his arms wrapped around her. He stank, the smell of old sweat, cigarette smoke, garlic breath, writhing sensually as if she loved having his body pressed against hers. At first it was fun, a distraction, a way to unwind after 25 years of motherhood. Allan didn't know, couldn't know, her little secret. She was ashamed. She had everything. A housewife raising their 3 beautiful, smart children. He worked hard to give them everything they needed while she provided a safe home environment. Mother, housekeeper, chauffeur, lover. She understood that some women were unhappy with such roles, but she thrived. First David's graduation, then Carrie's, and finally her baby Josh left home almost 7 months ago. She felt lonely, not knowing what to do with herself while her husband, her soul mate, was immersed in work. She understood that he worked for them, their future. However, she felt the first cracks in her ideal world almost 25 years later. What do they say about idle hands? She looked up and smiled as Randy held her close. His hands, familiar with her body, running down her back. She reacted, her first sincere smile. God, Becca, if you weren't married, he began, as he often did. But I'm married and I love my husband. But we are perfect for each other, he reminded, taking the initiative into his own hands. She sighed, letting him follow his movements, enjoying what she was doing for a brief moment. He was right. For those few minutes they were perfect. But that was all. She wanted nothing more from this handsome man. It was exciting to know he felt differently, but that was all he would ever get. She pushed those thoughts away, living in the moment. He was himself when she returned home. He asked her how the evening of the bridge went. She smiled. As usual, gossip, criticism of husbands, too much wine. He nodded. He turned his attention back to his book, wondering what he should do. He had the beginnings of a plan, a desperate plan, but these were desperate times. She walked up the stairs, taking a second look at him. Something was wrong. She held her gaze. He was sitting in his usual chair. The book was open in front of him, but now she realized that he was not reading. He stared at the page, eyes unmoving, attention elsewhere. She continued to the bathroom, undressing and getting into the shower to wash off the stench. Allan heard the sound of water. Thursday evening. When it started, she was returning excited from a night of the bridge. They made love, and it was just like in years past. She was still a striking woman, not a classic beauty, but with that tall, slender body that aged so well, legs that could still make his heart race. For Allan, she was the epitome of beauty. For the past couple of months, she would shower and retreat to bed, exhausted, pushing away any attempts at affection. He sat in his chair, hardening his heart to what he had to do. Becca didn't cry. She didn't cry. Not when he was around. She lay there wondering how it had come to this. Almost a month had passed since he took her in his arms and made love to her. Loved her as only he could. Their love life has always been one of the strong points of their relationship. They seemed to be in perfect harmony with each other. After their last child left, for several weeks they were like teenagers in love, desperately wanting each other, using their freedom. She could admit to herself that she was partly to blame. For the first time in their marriage, he wanted more than her. She refused several times, especially after her nightly forays. She agreed several times, but both realized that she was doing it for his sake, without desire. He started making up excuses. I had a stomach ache for one night, a series of headaches. She spent more time away from home, late afternoons and evenings, with other empty nesters. He worked late, stayed late at work, and traveled more. She was hurt when she found out that one of his business trips was anything but. How did he really think he could hide it? The wives talked, and she was friends with many of his colleagues. There was no business trip. He took some personal time and left for 3 days. He called her every day, telling her what he was doing, what meetings he was attending. He told her how much he missed her every night and how much he loved her. Lie. All lies. He was upset when he returned, no doubt feeling guilty. She did not demand explanations, did not confront him with a fact. She let her doubts gnaw at her, but she couldn't imagine life without him. She knew that he loved her, and she loved him. The pain was devastating. When he turned to take her into his arms in bed, she turned away. How could he cheat on her? How could he? Allan sat in his office, looking at his phone. He couldn't put it off any longer. He made a decision, no matter how painful it was. He went through his options several times. He didn't like the decision, but he had no choice. His life is over. Their life is over. 25 years. His heart swelled when he remembered those years. He lived a happy life. He realized that he had experienced more joy than any person deserved. He closed his eyes, remembering their honeymoon. Neither he nor she were innocent, but the extent of their experience was ridiculous. This week had been the best week of his life with his new wife. They were open to each other about their fears and concerns. They started slowly and learned together, from each other. By the end of the week, they barely left their room except to eat. Allan couldn't get enough of her incredible body. He could still remember the sound of her passion. He could get horny just thinking about it. He picked up the phone and called her. Dinner at the Hilton and room for later. His heart was pounding and his hands were sweating as he hung up. That's all. There is no way back. He was not a perfect person. He did things he was ashamed of in the past, took liberties he shouldn't have. Never with the intent to hurt and rarely with the same woman twice. But this was different. Allan knew she would be out of the house when he called, avoiding talking to her directly. He left a message saying he would be late and had dinner with a client. He told Sandra, his assistant, that he had a late meeting and that he would leave the office by 4 p.m. She managed his calendar and knew nothing was planned, but she accepted his word. Must be a new business or some old friend. Sandra worked for him for almost 9 years. She knew him almost as well as his wife. He waited in the hall and saw her walk through the door. Stunning, much younger than himself, catching every man's eye as she walked through the doors. Her eyes scanned the large open space and settled on him. A beautiful smile shone on her face, and she walked towards him, holding out her arms. "You are beautiful," he said quietly. "You're nice. Dinner? And drinks. Dancing if you want. You know, we don't have to do this. I'd be just as happy going upstairs with you right now." He wrapped his arm around her waist, ignoring the prying eyes. "No rush tonight. Dinner first. I would like to." In the hotel room, a couple of hours later, Allan was nervous. She stood in front of him, making a show of undressing. Her body was a miracle. Large breasts that he could get lost in. He would never say a word to his wife. He loved her small breasts that defied age, but sometimes he wanted more. Amber's breasts were a dream. Large, full, natural, inviting his touches. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Both knew what they were talking about. He felt guilty for what he did, then suppressed these feelings. He was going to do it, and damn it, he was going to at least try to enjoy it. Amber made sure he had a good time. She did everything he wanted, willingly, with joy. She saw his hesitation disappear and allowed herself to relax. He escorted her to the door when they finished. She kissed him and told him to call her soon. He promised to do this. He closed the door and lay down on the bed, mourning the end of his marriage. She was nervous, but no more than I was. The lights were dim, and she was under the covers, the open side of the bed neatly made. My heart was beating so fast that I could hear the sound of my pulse in my ears. She smiled at me and patted the bed next to her. The new diamond sparkled on her hand. I climbed into bed and turned towards her. The most beautiful girl I knew, tall, slender, with shiny, long, dark brown hair. I longed to see her body, but I knew that she was shy about it. Never dressed to seduce, she showed very little of her curves in public. "Say it again, Allan," she whispered, sliding into my arms. "Mrs. Allan Hammonds." "Are you sure? It seems so fast." I was confident after our first date. I've never felt anything like what I feel for you. It took me this long to save up enough for a ring. I love you, Becca. Her body pressed against mine, and my fingers slid along the smooth expanse of her back. I love you too, Allan. More than I can believe. I'll be the best wife in the world. She rolled onto her back, pulling me on top of her. Make love to me, Allan, tonight and forever. Becca was annoyed. If he was going to stay late at work, he could at least do it in the evenings when she was going out. She felt a little ashamed at the thought. She left him alone 2 nights a week, but when he did, she felt bitter. When he walked in, she knew something was wrong. He couldn't look at her. He apologized for being late. She stood up to meet him, and he looked like he was going to avoid her. "Allan," she said quietly, "it's after 10. "I'm sorry. The meeting took too long," was all he said. She walked up to him, hugging him. "I hate these late meetings." He answered stiffly, his arms wrapping around her lightly. Becca sensed something was wrong, and it hit her like a rock. He smelled like a woman. Perfume and sex. Did he go to a strip club? It wouldn't be the first time, but he'd always told her about it before. "I'm really tired, honey. I just want to take a shower and go to bed." She walked away slowly, her heart pounding like a hammer. "Of course, I missed you, that's all." He nodded. "Sometimes I miss you too, you know?" She felt a pang for it. He never reproached her for her late nights. Not yet. She made her decision. Tomorrow night will be the last. She hoped it wasn't too late. It wasn't his last. The following week, he was late with clients twice. Becca knew it was a lie. He met with clients after work no more than a few times a year. He didn't comment when she told him that their bridge club had broken up, but he was considerate when she stayed home instead of going out. He took her to bed that night, loving her with such intensity that she was filled with fear. She fell asleep in his arms and almost died when she woke up and felt his sobs as he held her tightly. She hadn't seen him cry in years, not since his father died. Tears rolled down her own cheeks. She didn't react. She didn't turn to hug him. He had too much pride for that. She pretended nothing was happening, that she was sleeping, praying that what he was going through would be temporary, so that their marriage wouldn't be in as much trouble as she feared. Did her innocent act of deceit lead them to this? By the 3rd week, Allan increased the pressure. He saw Amber 3 times and stayed overnight on Thursday without even returning home. He went straight to work from the hotel, wearing the same clothes as the day before. Becca called Sandra after the last counter call home. "Who is this client he's meeting with?" she asked. I don't know," Sandra admitted. She didn't want to get involved in this. She knew something was going on with her boss, and she hated that she was afraid of what he was doing. It didn't make sense. He and Becca were the perfect couple. Ideal. Apparently, the lovebirds are raising a beautiful family. There has never been a hint or rumor of problems in their marriage. 3 times this week. What client demands evening meetings 3 times a week? Becca asked sharply. He doesn't tell me anything, Becca, Sandra explained. I swear I don't know anything. He leaves early and tells me he has a meeting. That's all. Anyone else at these meetings? Any office workers making a lot of late-night trips? No, there's no one here. No way. I'm not going to put up with this. This has to stop, Becca almost screamed. Sandra almost burst into tears herself. I don't know what to tell you. Becca, I hate it too. He's changed. He looks miserable. He's in pain. I don't know what he's doing, but I swear the guilt is eating him up. He doesn't smile or joke anymore. Office, he became a complete bear. Allan was in agony. He expected a confrontation. Something. He couldn't let it go on much longer the way it was. He would have to take it to the next level. Becca took his hand, a mischievous smile on her face. She pulled him towards the chair and pushed him in the chest. With a heavy sigh, I sank onto my back, naked, fresh from the shower. She wore a hotel robe, loosened her belt, and opened it. I have a surprise for you, my husband, she teased. I love surprises, Mrs. Hammonds, I laughed. I'm sure you'll like this one. She leaned over and pressed her soft lips to mine. She moved lower, kissed the middle of my chest, and knelt down in front of me. The honeymoon so far has been crazy, passionate, wild. We only woke up an hour or so ago, and I still couldn't believe she was mine. I love you, Allan. I am yours, dear husband, body and soul. Yours forever. I will never deny you. Never. I lifted her to my knees, hugging her. I'm the happiest. She laughed. I know, the happiest man in the world, but not as happy as me, handsome. Sandra answered the call. I'd like to talk to Allan. Tell him it's Amber. He just left the office for a minute. Can I pass something on? Can you? Thank you very much. I need to reschedule our meeting for tonight. I will be at the restaurant at 18. I'll be sure to give him a message. Does he know which restaurant? The other side of the phone laughed. Ordinary. Sandra wrote down a note and left it on his desk. Your client has called and will be delayed until 18. She sat at her desk and made a difficult decision. She called Becca. Becca, this is Sandra. Her name is Amber, and she's meeting him tonight at some restaurant at 6 p.m. That's all I know. Becca felt a chill as her worst fears were confirmed. Thank you. I'm sorry to drag you into all this. I also wish, I do not understand this. It does not make sense. Becca sighed. Me too. I think I can see how we've grown a little further apart. We have some small problems. I never expected this. I'm lost. I do not know what to do. Don't do anything rash, okay? Before you say or do anything, make sure you understand what's going on. There must be a logical explanation. We're talking about Allan. Becca hung up and called Margie, her best friend. Margie was the only one with whom she shared her worries. They agreed that Becca should try to find out more. That's how she ended up in the parking lot near his office in Margie's car, with a wig on her head and large sunglasses. She waited for over an hour, nervously, before he finally appeared. He looked very casual, driving straight to the Hilton and using the valet parking. They were there at 5:45. Becca parked nearby, looked in the mirror, and, confident that she would not be recognized, slipped into the lobby. Allan couldn't help but recognize his 25-year-old wife, even in her ridiculous red wig and huge 70s-style sunglasses. He even recognized the sunglasses from their last vacation. His heart was pounding as he turned away from her, avoiding any chance of her catching his eye on her. When Amber arrived a few minutes later, He felt a sense of guilty pleasure as all eyes turned in her direction. She walked right up to him, and he hugged her and kissed her. She was a little surprised. The kiss was more intimate than he had ever done openly. She felt his hand on her ass. This was nothing new, even in public. Allan took her hand. Room first, then dinner. She smiled. It's your dime, lover. He checked in at the front desk and headed straight to the elevators. It was a hard day for him. He felt sick and a little weak. However, he was determined to put on a good performance. As soon as he entered the elevator, he pulled Amber into his arms, and Becca was already up and heading towards the elevators, moving without thinking. She saw them meet in the elevator, hugging each other. With bated breath, she watched the elevator rise to the 12th floor. She was shaking and couldn't think. Becca walked away slowly, then turned to the table. There were 3 people working there, and she was avoiding the young man on the left who was registering her husband. She walked up to the counter. Becca Hammonds, she said confidently. I left the key upstairs, 12th floor. She pulled out her driver's license and handed it to the woman. Of course, Mrs. Hammonds, she said politely, looking around the room. Mr. and Mrs. Hammonds, room 11216. She took the blank card and put it through the machine. What else can I do for you? No thanks. She was nervous as she approached the door of the room. She gathered her strength, took out her phone, and prepared to take a photo. She swiped the card through the lock and opened the door. She was in the hallway. A chest of drawers and a TV were visible ahead. She quietly closed the door. She moved forward slowly, camera in hand. Her husband was having sex. Becca picked up the camera and started recording. Allan knew she was there when he heard the door open. He let go of her legs and leaned down, kissing her. I love you, Amber. I love you so much. Where have you been all my life? Before she could respond, his lips touched hers again, stealing her breath away, cutting off any response. He tried to act surprised when he heard applause from behind him. Great show, Allan. Don't come home. Don't call. You're just disgusting me, Becca said. He thought violence might ensue, but she simply turned around and left the room. What was it? Amber asked. He reached out to her, stroking her side, trying to hold back the tears. You were wonderful, he told her. Indeed, I don't need your help anymore. She stood up, casually pulling on her dress. Will you at least explain? She asked. He shook his head. No, it was what I needed to do. That's it. He was hit hard and staggered back towards the bed. He curled up in pain, and she came to him, a poor broken man. She held him until the worst passed, stroking his hair. He was so stoically calm, hiding his pain, his emotions, so typical. She felt the warmth of his head, the sweat. She pulled him back to bed, covering him with the blanket. He moaned softly, and she took off her dress, climbing in next to him. No friend would leave her man in such pain. Margie sat with her when Allan returned home a few hours later. The keys still worked, and he entered the house. I told you not to come back, his wife snapped. This is my house. I paid for it. I have every right to be here, he said wearily, trying to maintain an appearance of strength. Margie hugged his wife, comforting her. You're worthless. Couldn't you just stay in your love nest and give her one night to deal with your betrayal? He went to the refrigerator and took a beer. He unscrewed the cap and took a long sip. Why, Allan? Why did you do this to us? Becca cried. I'm not going to discuss this with your friend here. Margie looked shocked. You bastard. She needs someone with her now. How was the bridge party? Margie, it was your idea, wasn't it? Margie turned pale and his wife sobbed quietly. Yeah, and it ended. You know that. Once Becca and Jean left, we didn't have enough players to play. Okay? Stick to your lie. You're her guest, so I'm not going to kick you out the door, but don't talk to me again, or I might forget that I'm a gentleman. Gentleman, she screamed, stopping suddenly when she saw the anger in his eyes as he approached her. "One more word to me, and I swear I'll wipe that damn grin off your face. Got it?" She nodded fearfully. He was a big, scary man, over 6 feet tall, strong, broad-shouldered, more than her ex-husband, much more. However, she never expected such a reaction from the calm, collected Allan. He turned away. "I'm going to bed. You can use the guest bedroom. Becca, you can join me in bed, either of you. Hell, both of you, if you want. Come naked if you want. I'm still horny." Allan lay there suffering, afraid that his wife might for some damn reason come into their room. He breathed a sigh of relief when he heard the guest bedroom door close loudly, and a few minutes later the car pulled out of his driveway. He relaxed as much as possible and pressed his face into the pillow, fighting back tears. It was much more difficult than he imagined. He fought to harden his heart, reminding himself why he was doing this. 25 years. Something was wrong. She's been acting nervous the last couple of days. We didn't make love for 2 days in a row. This was a record for us, just 2 months after our wedding. I knew there were changes happening at her job. She talked on the phone a lot. She even lowered her voice, almost whispering into the device as I walked past. I left a couple of hours early and got ready. She entered the bedroom, following a trail of rose petals. I watched her eyes as she took in the sight, dozens of red roses in vases throughout the room. The lights dimmed, 3 dozen candles illuminating our sanctuary. She stopped in surprise, and I saw tears in her eyes. I approached her, slowly undressing this body that I was fascinated by. "SHH, now, I can see you're stressed right now. Let me take care of you." "Allan," she said quietly, "please, let me do this for you. We can talk later if you want." She nodded, the corners of her sexy lips turning up slightly. I undressed her, making fun of her simple panties. "That ass deserves better. I'll take you shopping this weekend." She laughed. "That's a good idea." I kissed her thigh and led her to the bathroom, helping her step into the bubble bath. "Relax," I whispered, and handed her a glass of her favorite Chardonnay. I pressed the player button, and the sounds of a symphony filled the room. She looked at me, and I could see the love in her eyes. It was worth everything. I put her clothes away and took out what I needed for the next step, forcing myself to be patient. 20 minutes later, I went into the bathroom. She was half asleep. I leaned down and let my lips touch hers. Her eyes opened, and she smiled. "I don't deserve you," she said. "You deserve so much better, but you're stuck with me," I teased. "Forever," she whispered, wrapping her arms around my neck and pulling me in for another kiss. I emptied the bath and helped her up. I had a large, new ultra-soft sheet that I used to dry her. When I was done, I tossed it aside and led her, naked, back to the bedroom. She allowed me to lay her down on the bed, on her stomach. I turned on some quiet music and warmed the massage oil in my hand. I took my time, slowly worshiping her body, my hands rubbing and massaging every square inch. She sighed often, moving imperceptibly under my guidance. I turned it over and did it all again, from the front side. When I finished, it seemed to me that there was not a single bone left in her body. I lay down next to her, caressing her face. "I know something is bothering you, beauty. Talk to me. You can always trust me. Please, no matter what happens, I want to be by your side. I know I'm not the most demonstrative person in the world, but you should know that you mean the world to me." Her hand touched my cheek. "You will become a dad. Please tell me you're not angry." "Insane," I said as I sat down, my mind turning into a whirlpool. "Dad, are you sure?" Today the doctor confirmed this. I know we said we'd wait. I took her in my arms, laughing, tears welling up in my eyes. She looked at me in surprise, extended her hand, and wiped away my tears. "Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will be the best father I can be. I swear, I will do everything I can for you." She looked nervous. Are you angry at me? I kissed her deeply. Are you angry? I am the luckiest person in the world. I can never be angry with you. Not because you gave me the most wonderful gift imaginable. I looked at her nervousness and my stomach suddenly lurched. You want this, don't you? She gasped. How can you even ask? I want this more than anything in the world. I want to give birth to your children, raise them together, watch them grow up with us. I love you, Allan. She hugged me tightly and desperately. Forever, do you promise? Forever. He swallowed 2 of his pills and went downstairs. She was sitting at the kitchen table when he pulled out a cup and poured himself some coffee. Why, Allan? Can you just explain why? She asked quietly. He grinned. Come on, Becca. Have you seen her? Is it because of the night of the bridge? She asked. Listen, we've had a good run. 24 great years. 1 so-so. 3 great kids. You've been a great wife and mother. We can quit this comedy now. We both want something different. There's no need to hide it anymore. It was just dancing, Allan. Just dancing. Just that. I don't want anything else. You're my husband. I love you. I want to grow old with you. Allan laughed. You have a funny way of showing it. Our love life is terrible. You haven't been decent in bed for years, so I didn't really care that you didn't want to have sex anymore. Just lies. Months and months of lies. This is not love. I will tell you one thing. You have fully learned the lesson of aging. He tried to offend her, and judging by the expression on her face, he succeeded. You never said anything, she stammered. Are you serious? You're my wife. I shouldn't have said anything. It's all for the best anyway, isn't it? You've been getting what you want for almost a year, and I'm getting the best sex of my life with a beautiful woman who is taking care of me. I guess I should say thank you. Now I have to go. Where are you going? It's Saturday. You don't have to go to work. We need to talk about this. I'm going to meet a friend. She wasn't feeling well last night. Since we don't have to hide anything anymore, I'll spend some time with her. Why don't you go see Margie? Thank her for everything she's done for you. Sincerely, you could have been stuck in our rut for another 20, 30 years if she hadn't helped you discover your true colors. You're the one who cheats, Becca screamed. All I did was dance with men. Just that. Nothing sexy. It's not even close to what you allow yourself. I'm a man. I need sex, and I'm not going to share it with her. It's not safe anymore. I didn't sleep with anyone, she screamed. Certainly not with me in recent months, Allan chuckled. I'll be back Sunday night. Maybe you can cook your roast. Don't go overboard with the onions this time, okay? Allan left and checked into a motel. He spent the day going over his finances again, making sure he hadn't missed anything. He looked at the numbers and again reminded himself why he was doing this. This was the best decision. She deserved it. 25 years. She looked stunning in her simple black dress, tired but happy after an evening of dinner and dancing. Our 1-year anniversary. Her parents took David out for the evening. We were alone. For the first time overnight since our son was born 3 months ago. Our child, conceived on our honeymoon. Arriving home, she closed the door and kissed me. Thank you, everything was perfect, she whispered, raising her hand to run her fingers over the pearl necklace I gave her. She stepped back, smiling perkily. Now I have a gift for you. Give me 10 minutes and meet me in our bedroom. It was almost impossible to wait that long, but I watched the minute hand on the mantel clock slowly cross the dial until I did as it asked. She was waiting for me, dressed in the most amazing lace dress. You. SHH, she whispered, pressing her finger to my lips. She undressed me slowly, walking around my body, taking her time until I was naked. This is perfect. You're perfect. She laughed. Hardly, but I'm glad you think so. I just want to be perfect for you. Your ideal woman. Accept my gift. She pressed herself close to me. Looks like you liked it. What do you think, Mr. Lucky? God, Becca, what have I ever done to deserve you? You loved me. Forever, I reminded her. Of course. That's understandable. She made a small grimace. She was sitting in the living room. Margie was with her again. Get out of here. I already called the police, said his loving wife. Okay, maybe they'll take this bitch with them. Is the roast ready? Go away, Becca screamed. Allan entered the kitchen and saw that nothing was cooked. He sighed and checked the refrigerator. Sandwich fillings. He made himself a sandwich and took a bite. I took a glass of water to wash it down. There's something wrong with the locks, he said calmly as the women sat together. My key didn't fit. The women glared at him as he worked on his sandwich. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang and he stood up. I'll open it. You two look cozy. Allan opened the door with a sandwich in his hand, looking out through the peephole. He opened the door. Good evening, officers. How can I help you? The man at the door looked him over. We received a call about a break-in. Allan opened the door. I'm sure it was a simple mistake. Would you like to come in? Two uniformed officers entered the house, looking around. I guess you didn't call, the taller one said. No, I think it was my wife. She's in the living room. The two men followed him. Becca stood. I don't want him here. He broke in through the back door. The officer looked at me. This is true. Allan nodded. Yes, my key didn't fit, and no one answered the bell. I tried to cause as little damage as possible. The officers looked at each other, then at Becca. This is true. I told him not to come back after he cheated on me. I changed the locks. The officer sighed. Madam, is this your house? Only yours? She looked angry. I won't have him here threatening me. Did he threaten you? Margie intervened. He hit her. Twice. I saw it. Becca looked surprised. More surprised than Allan. He expected something like this. This is true? Asked the shorter officer, Officer Roland by his badge. Yes, she said quietly. Twice. Allan laughed. Thank you, Margie. I don't know how I would have coped without you. And you too, Becca. Still with the lies. Any doubts I had, you've definitely put to rest. Officer Roland pulled me aside, asking me to speak to me outside and get my statement. The officer above, Officer McGregor, remained with the women. Allan told his story, denying that he hit anyone. I understand how it works, he said. Fucked up legal system, isn't it? Officer Roland looked confused. You should probably hire a lawyer. Already have. No problem. Can I take some things, or are you going to arrest me? With two witnesses, we'll have to arrest you and bring you in if they file a complaint. They didn't say anything in the original summons, so we'll have to see what their statements say. Got it. Can I at least change my clothes? I feel kind of dirty. The officer seemed to think about it, then agreed. They walked through the entrance and into the master bedroom. Allan turned to the officer. I understand if you don't want to leave me alone. I can be dangerous, right? I'll change here. It'll take a minute. He undressed without embarrassment, changing everything, and put on jeans, a t-shirt, and a casual button-down shirt. He turned to the officer. Thanks for that. I appreciate it. Officer Roland nodded. You're welcome. You didn't hit her, did you? Hell no. 25 years. Check your records. Never had a challenge, not even a threat. She doesn't want me here. It's her easiest way out. I'm sure her friend discussed it with her. Her ex was aggressive, sent her out twice to the hospital. The officer escorted Allan back outside, and he didn't even try to talk to the women. Do you often encounter this? Asked Allan. That's the worst. Probably 20% of the calls are about some kind of domestic problem. If they support the complaint, we'll have to pick you up. There won't be a hearing until Monday. There won't be anything on Sunday. Allan shrugged. I can't help it now, can I? Officer Rowland sighed. You take it calmly. When I saw her there with Margie, I assumed that might be the case. I couldn't just let her kick me out of my own home without trying to protect herself. Officer McGregor walked out the door. A few minutes later, Allan was in handcuffs and being read his rights. 30 minutes later, he was in jail. They took his pills, and he explained his problems and showed them the prescription. He was given his medications as scheduled and overall had a good night's sleep. He thought things were going pretty smoothly. He hoped that the arrest would not slow down the process. He was charged Monday with third-degree domestic violence. Testimony was read, as well as the officer's report, including the lack of evidence of harm and the situation they encountered. Allan was led into a small room just outside the courtroom. He encountered a woman, an attractive brunette in her 30s, who seemed confused. She told him he was charged with a Class C misdemeanor, the lowest form of assault. She started asking questions after she informed him of his rights to have an attorney. He stopped her and asked what his options were. Allan explained that he did not beat his wife, but wanted to know directly what choices he had. The woman sighed and said he could plead guilty, not guilty or no contest. If he agrees to plead no contest given the evidence and reports and no previous problems, she will reduce the charges to harassment. He can get out by paying a $500 fine and court costs, but he will have limited contact with his wife and must remain out of his home under a protective order for 6 months. Violating a protective order is a serious, class of felony punishable by up to a year in jail and a fine of up to $4,000. This was acceptable to Allan. He didn't want to communicate with her. He didn't want her to communicate with him. He just wanted a damn divorce and needed her to start it. He pleaded no contest, signed the documents, and headed to the cashier to pay the fine. Allan had to get a police escort to return home, get what he needed, and pick up his car. It took almost 2 hours to organize, and it was early afternoon when he was escorted to the front door of the house. Becca seemed surprised, and when she tried to speak to him, the escorting officer advised her to wait outside or in the kitchen while he gathered his clothes and toiletries. Allan had to get her permission to take his laptop. After that, Becca tried to call him several times, but he never picked up. He listened to her messages, including many apologies that always ended with he just needed to give her some time. All 3 children received calls asking how they had already found out. He first called David, the eldest, and learned that Carrie had learned from a neighbor's friend that he had been taken away in handcuffs. He was angry at his father, and Allan explained that all he did was go into his house and his mother and her friend lied about him hitting her. Mom wouldn't do that, the son objected. So it's more likely that I hit your mother than that she lied about it because she was mad at me, asked Allan. Why didn't you just leave? This is my house. I paid for it. I have every right to live there. Mom said you cheated on her, he finally said. This is true. Yes. She went on dates for 6 months, telling me she was going to Margie's to play bridge. She stopped sleeping with me. Our marriage is over. She should have asked for a divorce, but instead decided to deceive me and humiliate me. After the 3rd night of bridge, one of the men from work told me he saw her dancing. Damn way to find out, huh? If she didn't want me anymore, she should have just been honest about it and asked for a divorce. I'll be talking to my lawyers soon. I'm not going to support her and let her live in this house when I'm not allowed to be in it. If she doesn't make the right choice, I will. Can't you fix it? Is it really that bad? He asked. I can't contact her for the next 6 months. How can we fix anything? She sent me to jail, damn it. I didn't do anything. No, this is beyond any fix now. It's only 6 months. Can't we at least wait that long, cool off, and see what we can do later? Living in a motel or a cheap apartment while I pay for her to stay in my house and date other men. Do you really expect me to put up with that? If Diana sent you to prison, would you still plan to marry her? It's not the same. We're not married. You've been together for 25 years. No, Dave, if there was something she wanted to discuss, maybe something could be done. I'm done with her. Now I need to figure out how to make her pay, that's all. The conversation did not end well, with David telling his father that he was stubborn and thick-headed. Allan called his eldest son a mama's boy and told the young man to leave him alone if he was going to stand by his mother after everything she had done. Calls to his other two children did not go as well as the first. It took a lot of effort to get Carrie angry enough to side with her mother and yell at him, but it all worked out. He effectively extended his no-contact rule to children. Mission accomplished. It took him several hours to arrange calls, but he finally managed to find a short-term rental apartment at a fairly low price. She was only for 5 months, but Allan decided that would probably be enough for him. He fielded several more calls from friends asking what was going on. He convinced them all that he was imprisoned by lying about hitting her and that he was going to divorce her and sue her for every last penny. She won't get a dime if he can achieve this. He didn't win much sympathy among them. Allan went to Walmart and bought a futon sofa for about $150, which they loaded onto his truck. Carrying him into the apartment was more difficult than it should have been, and he was grateful for the help of a couple of young guys coming inside while he was there. He went to bed, heartbroken over what he had to do, but happy that everything was working out the way he wanted. He missed his wife, but it was inevitable. I called her after lunch. 9 years of hard work paid off. I was called into the president's office at Tenos. "What's it like being the wife of the new director of production testing?" I asked her. "Really? You got a promotion." "Yeah, 12% raise, bonus plan, stock options, the full package. See if your parents can take the kids and wear something sexy. We're going to celebrate." "I'm so proud of you, Allan. No one deserves this more than you. I couldn't do it without you. You're my rock. I have a meeting at 4:00, so I won't be able to get there before. Must be home by 6. I'll be waiting. Hurry up, my love." I thought she would be waiting at the door, but the house was quiet. I called her, but no one answered. Her car was in the driveway. She had to be here. I called her again, then headed to the bedroom to change. I was a little annoyed. These feelings changed when I entered our bedroom. She was waiting for me on the bed. Her eyes sparkled with amusement at my gaze. "I love you, Mrs. Hammonds." She laughed. "Come on." "You never cease to amaze me," I said, kissing her neck. "Okay, I'm not even going to ask if you liked it. Now I need to make love to you, my perfect wife." She leaned back, inviting me. "I will never tell you no. Never." "Come on, baby, say it. I know what you want, Mr. Luck." I kissed her. The happiest man in the world. Let anyone argue otherwise. And I am the happiest woman in the world, made for each other. The next morning at the office, Sandra walked into his office as soon as he arrived there. Allan learned that she knew what had happened after she called his home and covered for him by sending messages to his boss and colleagues that he was unavailable that day while on personal leave. "You didn't really hit her, did you?" Sandra asked. "What do you think?" he answered. "Of course not. But why did she say you did it?" Allan smiled bitterly. "The easiest way to get rid of me. It's bad to be a man in the eyes of the law. Any complaint of violence, no matter what it is, and the man goes to jail. She got what she wanted, and now I can't have contact with her." He put his initials next to the change. She filed for divorce due to his infidelity. He left a note saying the differences could be resolved in 60 days. If she changed it, he wouldn't dispute it. She requested alimony, 50% of his salary. Allan knew that the court was unlikely to grant this requirement and changed it to 35% so that it would not look too suspicious. But in the long run, it wasn't that important. When he was done with his changes, he made copies and sent the original document by courier to the law firm listed in the header. He included a complete, updated copy of their financial statements, and a notarized limited power of attorney to contact his banks and investment companies to obtain the necessary information. Then he made a call. The lawyer was surprised by his quick response and assured Allan that he would receive a call as soon as the documents arrived. She thanked him for his promptness. The call came in at approximately 4:00, and the lawyer insisted on discussing all the details. Allan explained his logic for changing the time he had to pay his mortgage and explained that he would accept either 50% of his salary after the mortgage was paid off or 35%. Mrs. Davis said she thought she could work with what he suggested and would contact him. Allan grinned. "Should I work with this?" He gave her a gift, and she knew it very well. On Monday, the lawyer called and said that they accepted all the changes as he requested, and the documents were filed. Allan disappeared on Tuesday. Becca was worried. The bills were paid and the bank accounts were untouched. She transferred 80% of the funds from the joint account and took 80% of the deposits. The money went into the joint account, and not a single penny was withdrawn. The day after signing the documents, he apparently cashed out the deposits and the remainder of their investments. She spoke with Sandra, who told her that he resigned on Tuesday, effective immediately, taking nearly 6 weeks of his accrued vacation and sick leave. After the first month, she talked to the children, and they didn't hear anything from him. She even called his mother after being reprimanded for the way Becca treated her son. No, she didn't know where he was, hadn't heard from him since he told her about the divorce. Even if she knew, she wouldn't tell her. Becca didn't argue when they called her an ungrateful liar. Christmas has passed, as has New Year. That was hard. Sitting at the table with all 3 of her children who had come to support her, along with David's fiancée. The empty seat at the head of the table, where no one dared to sit, was a sad statement. Not a single card from her husband of 25 years. Nothing. She received a call from his mother asking if Becca had heard from him. His mother received a check for $10,000 in an unaddressed envelope. He said he loved her and always would. That was all he had contact with. During dinner prayer, Becca faltered when Carrie prayed for her father to be healthy and happy. She had to leave the table for a moment to calm down. After 60 days, Becca received notice that the divorce was official. She was alone in the house, devastated by the collapse of their marriage. She still didn't understand how things could go wrong so quickly. 25 years. He knew about her parties. He admitted this, but never spoke about it until that fateful day. She made a terrible mistake by giving in to Margie's accusation. She turned her husband into a criminal out of anger and resentment. This was the end of her friendship with Margie and the final nail in the coffin of their marriage. The mortgage was paid and money was regularly deposited into their joint account. She still had insurance, which she used to see a doctor and get antidepressants, as far as they were good for her. She looked for him, asking everyone she knew, going through phone records, old credit card statements, anything she could find. She thought about hiring a private investigator to find him. One lead turned out to be successful, a mysterious number on his cell phone account, and she ended up at a Hilton restaurant across from Amber, the woman who destroyed their marriage. She was surprised how easily she agreed to the meeting. "Are you still dating my husband?" Becca asked. "No, not since you walked in on us," Amber answered calmly. It didn't make sense. He spent the entire weekend with her. This led to a big scandal. That's what she told her interlocutor. "No, he never called me again. He said he wouldn't after your introduction. He was devastated. I stayed with him for a couple of hours until he came to his senses. He paid me one last time and left." I can imagine. Guilt must have been tormenting him. "No, I think it was more of a physical pain. He was so tired after dancing that he needed to lie down. He was taking some kind of pills. It wasn't always noticeable, but it was noticeable. You should have noticed, living with him." Becca thought about it. Allan never showed pain. He didn't complain when he stubbed his finger and lost a nail while working on a car. He was as stoic as she had ever encountered. She remembered how he held her, crying after the last time they made love. None of this made sense to her. She apologized for wasting the woman's time, leaving aside her intention to attack her for ruining her marriage. "If you hear anything from him, could you call me? I'm very worried. He disappeared almost 3 months ago, and I haven't heard from him again." Amber looked worried. "He ran away. That's not like him. He talked about you and the children with such love. He said you were the perfect wife. That didn't fit well with what he was doing. He, he's gone. He's still paying the bills and maintaining all the insurance. I need to know where he is. Please," Becca begged. Amber took her number and assured her that if she heard from Allan again, she would let her know. The big break came in February when a problem arose with Becky's insurance. Her policy number has changed. She received a new card in the mail, assuming it was an annual renewal, but her own share was reduced. After talking with the insurance company for over an hour, she was completely confused. Her insurance was paid for a year in advance. She was the only one insured. Her husband's COBRA expired, and he acquired a new, better plan. She asked for a copy of her old medical reports and received them in the mail a few days later. After a lunch of calls, she understood everything. Damn it. It was a huge party. Our family, friends, children were all present. Becca was wearing the tennis bracelet I gave her. We sat on the couch watching a DVD the kids made about our marriage. Photos and clips from our wedding to today. 25 years together. 25 perfect years. She climbed onto my lap, almost as slender at 50 as when I met her. Still the most beautiful woman I've ever known. We laughed and joked along with everyone else, accepting their teasing. When it was over, we received hugs and kisses from everyone. Congratulations on being a model marriage, an ideal couple. It was difficult to hold back the tears. We were both surprised when we were pushed towards the front door. They gave me a small bag, and the door opened. A limousine was waiting at the curb. David patted me on the back. "Come on, your carriage is waiting. Thank you for being the best parents in the world." I hugged my kids and took my perfect wife, the love of my life, by the hand and walked out to our ride. The driver held the door for us. We took advantage of the champagne. "Did you know about this?" Becca asked. "I'm just as surprised as you are." We were taken to the hotel where we were met by a woman in uniform. "Thank you for choosing us to celebrate this occasion." The receptionist took the bag and we followed our hostess. She took us to the top floor and opened the door for us. The suite was amazing, huge, beautiful. We entered, looking around. "Dial 50 on your phone if you need anything." "Anything," the woman said. She smiled, taking our hands in hers. "Someone loves you very much. You know, you're the talk of the entire hotel. We're proud to have you here." I reached for my wallet, and she stopped me. "No, everything is paid for, very generously. By the way, please don't hesitate to call." They left us and Becca, and I stood looking at each other. "Do you believe in that?" she asked. "I can't believe any of this. Not since the first day you sat across from me in the bookstore." 25 years, she said softly. "I know I should feel old, but you make me feel like a teenager. I love you, Allan." We took advantage of the facilities. We also ordered champagne and strawberries. We spent half an hour in the jacuzzi. She excused herself to the bedroom to get ready for me. She called me, and my heart almost stopped looking at her beauty. I came closer, hugging her. "I love you more today than ever, and I will love you even more tomorrow. I adore you, Mrs. Hammonds. I can't wait for the next 25 years. You want to invite this cute girl here? She seemed so interested in you. She said anything, didn't she?" "For me, there is only you, Becca. Never. I am a one woman." "Me too, darling. I can't imagine myself with anyone else." She rolled over, looking at me. "Love me, Allan." Thank you for making all my dreams come true. She laughed. Do you think our party guests will be surprised to find out what we do? I laughed as I hugged her, rocking her in my arms. I doubt. Does this ever surprise you? She asked. Every day. How can it get better and better when it's already the best? The happiest. Yes, everyone knows. Both of us. She kissed me. Do you want to try again? Allan woke up and instinctively reached for the button to add more painkillers. Someone's hand slid into his arm, and he looked around. Happy Valentine's Day, she said quietly. He was in shock for several moments, trying to comprehend what was happening. A large heart-shaped balloon was tied to the head of his bed as his wife looked down at him with tears in her eyes. You weren't supposed to know, he said. She leaned over and hugged him. I'm really sorry. Forgive me for all. Please forgive me. I should never have lied to you. He reached out, moved the tube going into his hand, and hugged her. Not necessary. I know you didn't do anything. I'm sorry I had to throw this in your face. I admit, I was a little jealous and watched you a couple of times. I know you've never cheated. Why? She asked. He felt a touch on the opposite hand and, looking back, saw his 3 children there. Happy Valentine's Day, Daddy, Carrie whispered, leaning down and kissing his forehead. She repeated her mother's question. Why, Daddy? Why did you leave us? Our insurance. It won't cover my expenses. It will drain our resources, take away everything we have worked so hard for. In the end, you will be left with nothing. Plus, you will lose me. This was a decision we had to make together, Becca said firmly. No, I knew what you would choose, and I couldn't live with it. I made sure that you received everything that I could legally give you. There are 3 gifts for the kids from what's left after I cashed out my 401k, about $35,000 each. The mortgage has been paid off. I hope you have enough money, and my life insurance should help. It's only about $750,000. I wish I had taken more when I could have. I don't understand. Have you given everything? I had to. Medicare now covers everything. If I had money, they would take it until I had none left. I'd rather you have them than them. I'm really sorry. Your novel. Why did you sleep with this woman? I needed you to divorce me. You should have come for me, asking for as much as possible so that I could give you freedom. You are a beautiful woman, Becca. The best wife in the world. Better than I deserve. I want you to be happy, to find a loving man to whom you can give yourself. Live well for me. Please. You tried to make me hate you, she said. He was tired again. He tried to sleep as much as the pain allowed him. Because I love you, he explained. She cried inconsolably while he fell asleep. The energy from talking was too great. Allan woke up a few hours later, and they were still waiting with him. The pain was almost unbearable. He reached for the button but stopped. He needed to have a clear head. He's awake, he heard Josh say. Then they stood around him again. Allan reached for his wife's hand and felt her soft skin on his again. I love you, Becca. Always loved. I'm sorry that I cheated on you. Please forgive me, he begged. The tears, which could not be quelled by the pain of his exhausted body, flowed freely. Oh, Allan, she exclaimed. Stop that. Let me take you home. We will find better doctors. We can beat this. It was too late for that, but he nodded. I'd like that. The kids gave him cards, which he asked Becca to read to him, and Carrie placed a couple of stuffed animals in his hands. You are the best dad in the world, she said, kissing his emaciated cheek, tears running down his skin. Another jolt of pain shot through his body, and he pressed the button, allowing the painkiller to flow into his veins. He was embarrassed that they saw him like this, weak. Allan reached over to the table next to him and picked up a folded piece of paper. He handed it to Becca. Happy Valentine's Day, honey, he said. He smiled at her and closed his eyes. Becca looked at the homemade card. On the front was a poorly drawn heart, colored red. It had their initials with "True Love Forever" underneath them, as they had carved into a tree in Battery Park after he proposed. She opened it and read his clumsy, shaky handwriting. To Becky, my first, last, and only true love. Thank you for 25 perfect years. I am the luckiest man in the world to have had your love. I love you. Your husband, Allan. She wiped away her tears and hugged him, crying, telling him that she loved him and always would. My heart was breaking. I cheated on her. I didn't like it. I hated that I had to do this, forcing her out of my life, trying to make her hate me. I knew it would be difficult. I had no idea how devastating it would be. The pain became more and more frequent. Out of nowhere, agony paralyzed me. The pills helped. Almost every day I had to endure a period of blinding pain. She stopped her only outlet, harmless dancing, a way to make herself feel young and naughty again. I watched her dance with different men twice, never more than a couple times with each, pushing them away, not allowing them to sit with her, refusing any drinks. The girls acted together. Most of them acted like this, except for that bitch Margie. She was the only one who wasn't married, so I guess I shouldn't blame her for that. Lying in bed next to her, I looked at this body, mine, and only mine, for 25 years. I knew every inch of him better than I knew my own. I couldn't help myself. I promised myself to stay away, not to touch. For the sake of the plan, it was no use. I could smell her, feel the warmth coming from her. She came to bed naked for the first time in months. I reached out to her, placing my hand on her shoulder. She didn't move, didn't push me away, didn't turn towards me. I moved closer. My hand slid down her side. My lips touched her shoulder. I kissed her down to her neck. "I'm sorry," she whispered quietly. "And me too." I pinched her ear, and she turned to me. I carefully turned her onto her back, rising above her. "What will happen to us?" she asked. I reassured her, scared to death that I would ruin everything. I couldn't hide my love for her. I made love to her in silence, our bodies working in perfect harmony. I looked into her eyes, my love for her on the verge of ruining my carefully laid plan. I needed her to know, for the last time in my life, with the love of my life, with the perfect wife, the mother of my children. I wish it were different. It was unfair, but I accepted it. I've had the best 25 years anyone could ask for. She was everything to me. I'll leave in 6 months. Incurable, inoperable. I couldn't drag her into this. She deserved so much more. She had so much to share. Too big a heart. She should have a chance to move on, be happy, and never worry about money. God, how I loved her. Why is this happening to me? And I cheated on her. I prayed that in time she might forgive me. Again, I wondered if I was doing the right thing. Despite all the pain, it still seemed like the best option. Let me be the bad guy. If only she was provided for. I looked into her eyes and saw love there. Still, after everything I've already done, it was hard to kill this light. I hated it. I hated myself. She looked at me, and I saw in her eyes the struggle of love with fear. Allan. SHH. I know. Me too. I shouldn't even have said that much. I lay down next to her, holding her. For the last time, for the rest of my life. This was the hardest part, never being able to hold her again. I felt her breathing slow as she relaxed in my arms. So perfect. I couldn't help it. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I remembered all the times we had. 25 years. Now it seems so short. I accepted it. Any year with her was worth everything. For 25 years I had everything. Dream. Ideal life. I was the happiest man in the world. I prayed that she would have at least another 25 years. I'll wait for her. Forever. I promised. The happiest man in the world never woke up again. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.